My book on Islamophilia, it's not actually currently available, which is rather annoying. It's
In episode 295 of the Saad Truth podcast, recorded on November 26, 2016, Gad Saad hosted the ever so insightful Douglas Murray. Their discussion focused on the concepts presented in Murray's book, Islamophilia. Murray admitted that the book was temporarily unavailable due to an upcoming rewrite and reissue. However, the ideas within its pages remained highly relevant to contemporary discourse.
phobia, which had been around for so many years and meant so little, or at least what it did mean was so wrong and so irritatingly wrong. I thought something far more prevalent was not a phobia, certainly not an irrational fear of Islam, but a sort of a weird love of Islam, not by.
Murray had introduced the term Islamophilia as a counterpoint to the often misused and misunderstood term Islamophobia. He found the latter term both irritating and inaccurate, arguing that what seemed more prevalent was not an irrational fear of Islam, but rather an inexplicable love for it, especially among non-Muslims. This phenomenon struck Murray as peculiar, considering that many admirers of Islam appear to have little to no actual knowledge of the religion.
Lathering of praise and adoration. I mean, I lost count of the numbers of politicians who started in the last 15 years quoting in speeches their favorite bits of the Quran. It's the sort of, why are you doing that?
And of course, Barack Obama said that the most beautiful sound is the call to.
Murray further noted a trend among various public figures who lavishly praised Islam while remaining critical on other belief systems. But in reality, was that always the case? Murray was particularly struck by the numerous politicians who, over the past 15 years prior, have cited their favorite verses from the Quran in public speeches. For example, Barack Obama once remarked that the most beautiful sound is the Muslim call to prayer.
By Muslims, but by non-Muslims. It'd be understandable for Muslims to love Islam. It was just rather strange that so many people who were not Muslims, and in many cases seemed to know absolutely nothing about Islam, were so enamored of the religion. And
this widespread phenomenon of Islamophilia, as Murray terms it, reflects a broader societal trend. The admiration for Islam appears to overshadow any critical engagement with the religion. Moreover, this was also a notion to which he had always championed as the leading critic on all things Islamic. As such, we suppose that by those same tokens, we can claim to see Murray's point of view, even if they appear hypercritical for the sake of it.
By Muslims, but by non-Muslims. It'd be understandable for Muslims to love Islam. It was just rather strange that so many people who were not Muslims, and in many cases seemed to know absolutely nothing about Islam, were so enamored of the religion. And
Murray further suggested how this unwarranted admiration extended to exhibitions like 1001 Islamic Inventions, which toured science museums globally in the US and Europe. It was especially curated by the Muslim Brotherhood organization and was ostensibly meant as an educational display. Or rather, in Murray's mind, it was an envy-laden celebration of Muslim achievement as being comparable to that of the West.
Everyone from actors and movie stars to prime ministers and presidents who would be critical, and understandably and rightly critical, of any and all belief systems, should there need to be, but who, when it came to Islam, only talked in this sort of...
The exhibit promoted the idea that Islam was responsible for pivotal scientific advancements like landscape gardening, urban planning, and other numerous achievements. Ultimately, Murray saw this as a form of propaganda that distorted historical facts. And Murray argued that this exemplified a broader trend of Islamophilia, where Western politeness and a desire to appear inclusive often led to uncritical acceptance of such claims.
Get past muster. I mean, if anyone had tried to claim that any other religion had sort of been responsible for absolutely every scientific invention, then people would raise an eyebrow and certainly wouldn't hand over the Science Museum in the national capital to such a piece of...
Had any other religion made such sweeping claims, it would likely have faced significant skepticism and critique. However, in this instance, prestigious science museums in major capitals embraced the exhibition without much resistance. This uncritical acceptance demonstrated a readiness to attribute nearly all scientific inventions to Islam particularly. And Murray found this laughable, being the Islamophobe that he represented, to use his own words.
On this occasion they did, and as I said, that's an example of Islamophilia right in front of you.
I've actually been exposed to this type of thinking in my own scientific work, where someone, usually from that part of the world, or at least of that faith, will write to me to say, oh, but you know that Charles Darwin is not really the guy who should be most known for.
At this point, Douglas Murray recounted how, in his own scientific work, he has come across individuals, often from specific regions of faiths, who challenged the credit given to Charles Darwin for the theory of evolution. These individuals, he notes, use convoluted reasoning to attribute such discoveries to obscure figures. In Murray's opinion, this reflected a broader manifestation of identity politics. And at its worst, identity politics usually came in the form of jingoism or pride.
Of the theory of evolution as some guide. But I think this is a manifestation of identity politics. I mean, you see the same thing with African studies, right? Right? The ancient Greeks were really blacks, right? And then so every single group that feels somehow aggrieved rewrites history so that all of the great wonders of the
Nonetheless, some, namely Murray, might argue that this tendency to rewrite historical narratives to suit contemporary identities was also prevalent in other fields, such as African studies, where some claim that the ancient Greeks were actually black. But if you thought hard about it, this same accusation of identity politics rightfully went both ways. And Europeans were being made to taste their own medicine, as their version of revisionism was now turning against them.
Advocate. It was totally anti-scientific, really. It was an act of proselytism by the Muslim Brotherhood, is how it started out. But this exhibition basically posited that Islam had invented the entire world, not just the creation of the world, but everything since.
Murray saw revisionism as a way for groups to reclaim a sense of pride and recognition, often at the expense of historical accuracy. According to him, this trend highlighted the dangers of allowing identity politics to influence other understanding of history and science, ultimately distorting the truth in favor of politically motivated narratives. To be clear, revisionism meant distorting or redacting historical truths to certain ends, and Europeans are indeed the guiltiest revisionists.
My favorite example was the rewriting of the Wright brothers, where the Wright brothers were wrong, that they didn't invent flight. But flight was invented by a Muslim in, I think, the 10th century, or in Andalusia or something. And the actual historical descriptions of this.
One particularly striking example of historical revisionism, where Islamophilia was considered, is the claim that the Wright brothers did not invent flight. Instead, some argue that flight was actually invented by a Muslim in 10th century Andalusia. The historical accounts of this individual depict him repeatedly throwing himself off high structures, only to fall to the ground at great speeds. Somehow, this act of falling has been interpreted as an attempt at flight.
And as you say, I mean, the game is to come up with somebody so obscure that sort of everyone sort of baffled. And because we're all polite, Westerners, if anyone says that anyone else invented anything, we're like, well, sure, it sounds good. Who would I be?
Ultimately, this kind of historical rewriting often involves highlighting obscure figures and making extravagant claims about their contributions. And in the prevailing climate of politeness and political correctness, such assertions frequently go unchallenged. And in Murray's view, Western societies reluctant to appear disrespectful or culturally insensitive may accept these claims at face value. But we can be sure that beyond the appearance of revisionism, the truth will always prevail. So, what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree that history was and is still being revised to cater to any certain race or narrative? Give us your opinions in the comments section below.